Alright, so it has been about a week since I recorded that last part because the helper springs that we ordered for this car ended up in limbo for a little bit. So anyway, long story short is I'm going to show you guys a little bit more about what I was talking about. So, unfortunately, I've already started putting things together because I'm trying to get this car going, so I don't have an example of how the coilover was before versus now because I've been getting everything. But main thing is so you'll notice, so these are the original springs that came on the coilover set. These are the helper springs that I ordered. So the biggest thing with helper springs is, and I don't know if I can show this with one hand, but yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, it is super easy to show with one hand. But yeah, so you can see how easy it is to compress these springs. They're like 15-pound springs. I don't know what these, but they're really, really light. Their main purpose is basically to keep the spring assembly from bouncing up and down. Like it keeps everything all rigidly, not even rigidly, but basically keeps the spring in place so that you don't have binding and rattling and anything like that. But it allows you to move this spring perch further down, essentially. So, I mentioned before about how when you're trying to set lower ride heights, you don't want to use this lower collar. These work great if you want to lift a car, then that's fine, because you don't really care. You want the vehicle physically higher off the ground. But when you're trying to lower a vehicle, if you use this lower perch mount, as I mentioned before, the wheel is actually going to be allowed to start and complete its travel higher up in the vehicle, which is how you end up with making contact with the fender liner and ripping stuff out and bumping into the chassis, etc. So what we did is we set this shock to a known good length. So essentially I took the springs off of this shock, put it on the car, and then we moved the suspension arms up and down, and we basically found a spot where we had the coilover set where the wheels and tires would never be allowed to make contact with any of the bodywork or the chassis. Once we found that fixed spot, we locked this in place, and so now we have the helper spring, which effectively allows us to lower the car, because essentially what it does is that the car can start to move down further in the stroke because it's compressing this helper spring instead of the main spring, and that's one of the ways that you can get a low ride height while still getting good droop travel. Now, ideally, you would have a shock body that's just machined to the specific length that you need. You would have the right spring. You would have the valving change. You have, all kinds of other stuff I could talk all day about. But in this case, we're really looking to do the best with what we've got because, he bought these coilovers. He's had these coilovers for years. They'll work just fine. So I'm going to go and I'll show you guys more a little bit later once I have everything installed, but you'll kind of see the ride height that we get, as well as you'll get to see how much droop travel the car has now.